We were at one of the most severe and long-term drought periods that we had seen in decades.
We had areas burn in 2007 that hadn't burned for 75 years. So.
We'd gotten to the point already that when we were taking people out on tours, we weren't talking about if a fire starts, we were saying when a fire starts.
At that point, we, the Georgia Forestry, all our landowners started talking, getting together as we always do, and say, this is the year you want to grease your tractors, this is the year you want to make sure your fire breaks are good shape, this is the year we are going to have a major project fire.
Well, the initial fire was actually did not start on the refuge. It started about 12 miles northwest of the refuge. It was started by a downed power line. It had some high winds, and the power line hit the ground and caused a spark and a fire that ran eventually 12 miles into the northwest corner of the refuge.
The Georgia Forestry people and others were on this thing immediately, but nevertheless, it just absolutely exploded. Within a couple of days, you know, it was 1,200 acres and growing. I mean, just by leaps and bounds, it was growing. And at one point, I mean, it looked like a mushroom cloud right out beyond those pine trees, right out off the back of our parking lot. It was just, the whole sky was full of it. Ash falling like snowfall, you know, smoke so thick, everything was just this yellowish, unearthly kind of color. It looked like the end of the world out there.
Georgia, from the initial start of the fire, all they could do was just kind of follow up the flanks, the two edges of the fire. They couldn't get out in front of it and do much because it was just spotting so far out ahead of itself.
They basically ran beside the fire and just tried to keep it from getting wider, and they did that for about 18 hours. The other part of this story is this wasn't the only fire. There had been a number of fires.
You know, the one from outside moved into the swamp, the one that ignited inside the swamp grew enormously, and finally they all merged together. By the time it was done, it had burned most of the landscape between Waycross, Georgia and Lake City, Florida. Inside the perimeter of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, you know, most of this is a swamp. The swamp is basically a peatland that holds water like a sponge, and if you get less than normal rainfall, you know, that sponge begins to dry out.
And these fires get entrenched in that peat, and it's something that we just can't put out. We just had to wait on what we call a season-ending event, which could be anywhere from a 5 to 6 inch rainfall.
Okefenokee Swamp is a fire-adapted, fire-shaped, and to some extent even fire-dependent landscape.
There's a stimulative factor. That fire goes through one of our native forests. It takes out a lot of fuels, it brings back a lot of grasses, it actually sets back invading species that are coming into the wetlands and opens them back up, and it's just kind of resets this cycle that the landscape's going to go through.
When the fire had passed, you could tell that everything had received this dusting of ash. The grass all around this, it never has been greener.
It's the Okefenokee Swamp. You know, it's mysterious, it is large, it is wild, it has all those attributes that just come along with that name. So it's integral to the health and long-term viability of the Okefenokee Swamp in the wilderness area to have fire and droughts and floods. It's what makes it, you know, so unique and beautiful.